Okay? Good day. This is the Spotlight on Media to Africa TV, live from Washington, D.C. And welcome to today's program to our viewers all across the world. Our panelists will be taking a closer look at the impact of the special status, the failed attempt by the Biya regime to pacify the war in southern Cameroon. Barely over a year after his re-election in 2018, Cameroon authoritarian President Paul Biya, on September 10, 2019, in an unusual address to the nation, announced a major national dialogue. According to the president, the dialogue would bring together Cameroonians to reflect on issues of national interest, including peace, security, national integration, unity, and progress. It is widely believed that the government pushed for the national dialogue to stage manage the conflict's outcome, desperately trying to project the image of benevolence, restraint through reconstruction and ex-combatant reintegrations. Nevertheless, these processes were poorly organized, poorly implemented, and came too little too late. President Biya, the main dialogue convener, was noticeably absent throughout the process. Key stakeholders in the conflict were deliberately left out of the talks. The separatist leaders abducted from Nigeria and revered by most Southern Cameroonians as the most credible leaders of the struggle were sidelined, despite the negotiations being held in Yaoundé, where they were currently detained. The dialogue exclusive nature and poor organization caused several credible international and local stakeholders and experts to boycott the meeting as well. Even though the conflict has continued for the past 5 years since the dialogue, the government still claims that the dialogue was a success, arguing that it is only a matter of time before the resolutions are fully implemented. The government has also demonstrated a lukewarm attitude towards potential for international response or intervention, asserting the issue is purely an internal matter. So today I have in the studio with me Kenneth Nde, who is the permanent consultant to the Spotlight. I am going to have the panelists introduce themselves. I have Dr. Wilson SMF from Atlanta. He has been a towering voice within the Cameroonian diaspora community here in the US. I also have Mimi Mefo of Mimi Mefo Information, and I think she's a CEO. She would do that introduction better. So I'm going to give her the pride of place as the only lady in the house to introduce herself. But before we allow her to do that, welcome Mimi, and congratulations to a brilliant achievement, your master's in international journalism. We of the Spotlight and Media to Africa want to wish you well. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me. And I want to also apologize, not like apology, but just to note that I've got a little bit of bad voice. I'm suffering from cold, and it started just a couple of days ago. Thank you so much for having me. And it's an honor to be the only lady on the platform. I'm seeing a very, very insightful guest, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to shed light on what is happening in Cameroon at the moment, and I'll also take home lots on my part. So, like you said, my name is Mimi Mefo Newu. I'm Mrs. Newu. I am CEO of Mimi Mefo Info, an online media platform, like one of the biggest English-speaking media platform in Cameroon. with about 15 journalists working, some from Cameroon, others across Europe. And we've been existing since 2018. But also, I work with the German broadcaster Deutsche Welle, which is also abbreviated as DW, as a multimedia journalist. What I do exactly with Deutsche Welle is I handle podcast, online reporting. You might have seen that on my online portfolio that we write a lot about Africa, including Cameroon. So yeah, my areas of interest are politics, human rights, gender-related issues, human interest, and yeah, Cameroon to be more specific, and also most importantly, freedom of expression. I think that will be all for now. I'm also a mom and a wife. Thank you.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Dr. SMA, over to you, please. I know it's cold over there. Uh, they say there's
Yes,
global
it
warming, but it
is.
looks like we're
It's
having
quite
global cooling
cool.
now.
You're right, Rachel.
So, but I'm happy, I'm hopeful that you are staying warm.
Yes, yes, Rachel. Thank you. Thank you to media to Africa. Congratulations, Mimi. Congratulations to you. My name is Wilson Aseme. I am a physician. I've been a physician now for almost a quarter of a century. I'm in private practice in Louisville, Kentucky. I'm also the coordinator of the Anglophone Action Group, which is an organization that seeks justice and fairness for Anglophones. In addition to that, I am the general coordination of the Cameroon Federalist Movement, which, as the name implies, wants to see a federal system of government in Cameroon. So it's such an honor to be here. Thank you for the invite, acknowledging the presence of the other panelists, Mimi and Mr. Nde, Kenneth. I look forward to very fruitful, helpful, productive discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc. Kenneth, over to you, please.
Thank you. My name is Kenneth Nda, and at this point in time, we at Media to Africa, I think, congratulations, Mimi, for your achievement. We've been watching you for a pretty long time, all the way you were persecuted by the Biya regime in the Cameroon Triangle. So to see you have left and come out, masterfully, it's a joy to say this. A lot of the time, we always get bad news. I think our focus these days and this year out here at Media to Africa is to ensure as a whole that the incumbent President Paul Biya, who has been at the helm of power in Cameroon since 1975, steps aside and does not run for office. The Biya regime has had several failures, and one of the, I would say, highlights in his failure is to divide Cameroon. In fact, Cameroon was supposed to be a model state from the time of 1961 with Professor Bernard Fanon and all these guys. And by 1982, when President Biya got into power, I think the results are out there for everyone to see. If Cameroon comes out to be divided, to be two countries today, it's thanks to President Paul Biya. Well, my dear friend seated right here by me, Brado, I'll pass the mic back onto you, and hopefully we can, get a wonderful show today.
Thank you, and we're going to get right onto it again. Welcome to the Spotlight on Media to Africa. Live from Washington, D.C., I am Tabenyang Echu. Doc, I'm going to go to you. I think you attended the Grand National Dialogue. At the end of that exercise, dozens of resolutions were reached during the national dialogue, including the granting of a special status to the two Anglophone regions. the restoration of the House of Chiefs, the establishment of a common law section at the National School of Magistracy, the allocation of the budget for reconstruction, and the rapid integration of the ex-combatants into the society were some of the measures that were earmarked to be implemented and used to hype the dialogue process. My question to you is, why has this not made any discernible impact on the daily realities of the people from those two regions?
Oh, thank you, Echu. Thank you very much for that question. If you permit, I'll give you a little background as to the charade that took place in Yaoundé. That's been called, known as the Major National Dialogue. It was just a show. So I was a member of the commission or committee on decentralization. I'm going to tell you what happened. First of all, to tell you how Anglophones are treated, on day 2 of the dialogue, the late Abuema Choi, who was vice chair of that committee on decentralization, and myself happened to be late, so we were stopped by security at the entrance to the committee room. He used his cell phone to call the prime minister, to tell him that we're prevented from getting into the room. Imagine, he was the vice chair of the committee, and there was this arrogant superintendent of police who told him, and I'm going to say this in French, said, "Monsieur, même si vous êtes ministre du ciel, vous n'entrerez pas." I felt so bad for the guy. The prime minister called the chair of the committee, Gole Philip Ngwese, who just happened to be auditioning for the job that he eventually had as ambassador to Canada. Anyway, and this chair asked the security people to let us in. This same security person, in front of everybody, said, "Le Premier Ministre c'est qui?" So this is head of government, chair of the Major National Dialogue, whose instructions were being disregarded. So that's number one. Number two, as a member of the Committee on Decentralization, let me tell you this. At no point in time did we discuss spatial status for the Anglophone region. It just did not happen. On day 4, October 3, 2019, when all the committees were supposed to, wrap up their work, the chair and the vice chair and all the people in charge of the organization, they came up with a supposed report that our committee had written. And they showed us that report. Everything there was wrong. And sometimes when you lie, there are little things that will give you away. Even the date on that report, I will tell you, I kid you not, was September 15, 2019. So here we are, October 3, 2019. We've been presented a report that was typed on September 15. So when we brought that to their attention, they said, oh, there's a mistake, we're going to correct this. And then they took the report away. That dialogue, my brother, was a made-up show to convince the world that the president was addressing the Cameroon, the Anglophone problem. They were not serious. So coming back to your question, why has there been no discernible impact? Well, they did not mean to solve the problem. There was no intent to solve any problem. All they wanted to do was to, what the French would say, faire semblant, pretend they were addressing the problem. There was no seriousness brought to it. Now, if you look at that law, the law on decentralization, you realize that they came up with regional councils. In the two Anglophone regions, House of Chiefs was added. The regional councils are still under the control of unelected governors. Yes, the governor of the Southwest and Northwest regions, they are supervisory authorities of the regional councils. Where does their funding come from? It comes from the Ministry of Decentralization. So there is no autonomy. The regional councils are just there as an added bureaucracy. They are not meant to solve any problem.
So I think to press you again on that, this is what the authoritarian president of Cameroon said in 2019. It should be recalled that the crisis was triggered by corporate demands made by lawyers and teachers calling for the translation of OHADA Uniform Arts into English and the preservation of the specificity of the Anglo-Saxon judicial and educational system in the two regions. Could the misdiagnosis of the crisis as corporate demands, as he called it, and not properly identifying the root causes be the reason of this failure to address or even affected the impact or the outcome of that dialogue?
You see, the problem, the Anglophone problem is more than that. It's a systematic, it's a structural, constitutional, institutional disregard, injustice, unfairness that, among Anglophones in Cameroon. The corporate demands of teachers and lawyers in 2016 was just the last straw, that breaks the camel's back. But we have been suffering since 1960 or 1961. What happened in 2016 was just an accumulation of an eventuality that was going to happen sooner or later. And I'm sure the government knows this. They understand this, that there's an unwillingness to go to the root of the problem. You see, in my line of work, I'm a physician. If you come to me with high blood pressure and I give you medication without going to the root cause of your condition, I will just be trying to do symptomatic relief. That is what the government is doing. There's no real intent on the part of the president to solve the problem. We have to come to the conclusion that, there is this tendency to think, oh, the president is a good man. It's just the people around him. Well, my brother, for how long will the learning curve last? We have to come to a place to understand that the problem is the president. He is the problem. He is unwilling, for some strange reason, to address the cause of the problem. And I have a few ideas why that is. And I can, expatiate on that if you so. Yeah.
I know I'm really pressing on you to continue. Would that be a call for him not to run for re-election, given that he has failed woefully, not only to deliver after 42 years at the Supreme Magistracy, even at a critical issue in the life of the country that has risked dividing that country? He has also failed woefully to even engage the responsible parties into an inclusive dialogue that could have resolved the problem.
What I do, one of the things that I do in my line of work is that I make determination on fitness for duty. So employers will send candidates to me, people seeking particular positions, and they will ask me to determine if those people can do their job. Now, granted, I have to talk to these people, I have to perform a physical examination, and I have to review their job description. In the case of the president, I must admit, I haven't seen him, I've not talked to him, and I've not performed a physical exam. But, given that he has been in power, he's been in public for 60 plus years, we have a trove of information on him. We have videos, we have speeches, we have things that we can use to analyze. And I can tell you, given my knowledge of work, given the things that I know about the president, and also given the limitations, like I said, that I haven't spoken to him, I haven't performed a physical examination, but I don't think he is fit for duty. I don't think he can perform the duties of a president. He is unfit. He should not run.
Mimi, I think I would quickly pivot to you. 8 years after the outbreak of the crisis and the hostilities, with more than 10,000 people killed, villages burned down, about 1 million IDPs and thousands of refugees in the neighboring countries. Neither Mr. Biya nor his wife, Chantal Biya, have visited these regions and affected communities to show compassion with the people they claim are part of a one and indivisible Cameroon. Mr. Biya has indicated he could run again to succeed himself. Do you think Mr. Biya should run again, and why anyone from this region should vote for him? Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, the other panelist has vividly described the situation in Cameroon, and I don't think it's very different from what I think. As the journalist who has been covering the situation in Cameroon, the conflict, and the country's political landscape, talking to actors and Cameroonians in general, what I have as opinion, because apart from being a journalist, I'm also a citizen, I'm a Cameroonian. It's very, very difficult to now fathom why President Paul Biya will even consider running for office after 42 years in power. And it's even more shocking to understand why a right-thinking Cameroonian, because for the past months or weeks in 2024, when the year was coming to an end, we saw groups of Cameroonians rallying to call for President Paul Biya, who is now 91 years old. And by the time the election takes place, he will be 92. Sorry about the noise. He'll be 92. Why people would rally to call for him to stand for president? I always ask myself, and the other day when I was talking to a pro-BI, he came to on my TikTok live, and I wanted to ask him about Cameroon's future this year, 2025, which is a very, very determining year for Cameroon, what he thinks about Biya's candidacy. And when he was so much defensive, he kept defending and saying it's good to be with someone you already know and so on. I asked him just one question. If you were on a flight from probably the US, where you are, traveling to Cameroon, and they tell you that the pilot is 92 or more than 90, are you going to be comfortable as a passenger? He said no, which is the same question that I've always asked myself. I've asked a lot of people. If you're traveling from Bamenda to Douala or vice versa, and the driver is more than 90 years old, would you be comfortable? The answer is no. So to think that a person of that age can manage a country is totally beyond understanding. You mentioned the Anglophone crisis. The crisis has left over 10,000 people dead, millions displaced, and countless villages have been destroyed, razed. I wish to say that these numbers are even underreported, because before we used to have reporters on the ground who send information. We had whistleblowers who could take videos, pictures, and give us like up to date. We have in some localities, but not in all the localities. Things happen in the northwest and the southwest regions of Cameroon today, and we only get to hear about some of them a month after or 2 months after. Some of these villages are remote. They are very far away. People do not have access to internet to give us information like live, up-to-date information as it is happening. They get to update us several weeks later. That's just to tell you how much the conflict is underreported. So it is safe to say that if there was one thing that confirms Biya's failure in Cameroon is the Anglophone crisis. Biya has failed Cameroonians from what we have been seeing, the two English-speaking regions, the northwest and the southwest regions. Imagine leading a country and refusing to visit the part of the country that is in flames. You talked about Biya not visiting, Chantal Biya not visiting. He's never been there. I mean, even for campaigns, Biya has never visited the northwest and the southwest regions of Cameroon. He's simply turned deaf ears, like very insensitive, deeply insensitive. Um, my other panelists have just said during the national dialogue about something that had to do with the conflict in Cameroon. Bobia was not present. He was not there. He was not part of the dialogue. He was not part of the talks. And we have seen that the dialogue failed woefully because up to now people are being killed on a daily basis. The conflict has worsened. People have no reason to vote for him. You asked about voting for Paul Biya. I don't see why Anglophones would be voting for President Paul Biya. And why would you give your vote to someone who completely ignored your worries? As Anglophone Cameroonians have been suffering for decades, for so many years. Why would anyone in the Anglophone regions that Biya has not visited vote for him? He spends more time in Geneva and Yaoundé than in any part of Cameroon, and you only see him in the far north region of Cameroon when the elections are coming. I know he's probably, if he's going to stand, we are not sure because he's not officially said he wants to be candidate, but you can only see him visit another part of Cameroon when he's going for campaigns, and he will not be up to 2 cities. So let's not forget the broader picture here. Roads in despair in Cameroon. We saw the number of road accidents in the country, crumbling healthcare system, and one of the panelists is an expert in the medical sector. You can compare the situation out of Cameroon and in Cameroon. It's day and night. Skyrocketing unemployment in the country. And conflict is not just in the northwest and the southwest region. We've got a lot happening across Cameroon. High rate unemployment and tribalism. There's just so much going on. So the question shouldn't be even whether Biya should run. It should be why has he not stepped down?
I
Why
think
has he not stepped down?
I think
And I wanted to just say something. In all fairness, it's not just President Paul Biya who has not visited the region. Let's also talk about the opposition leaders who want to step into his shoes. Has Cabral Libi ever visited the Anglophone regions? No.
there
Has
is a
Kamjo
question
ever
on
been
that.
there?
On the
No.
Mimi, there is a question about the opposition and the role they have played. Since you
Okay.
are on that, I am going to press on that question. That the political opposition and the civil society groups and even the church have remained silent and paid lip service
Mhm,
to the resolution of the crisis or the
mhm,
release of the prisoners and leaders of the southern Cameroons.
mhm.
Recently, I have seen a spate of them deploring the way late Honorable Aya Paul Abine was humiliated and treated by the regime. Is this really not a mockery that most of these latter day saints, not crying more than the bereaved, never raise a voice to advocate for his mistreatment by the regime within their highly connected networks around the world? This goes to the issue you raised about the political opposition. They have been muted. They have not said anything. They have not advocated for the release of the leaders. They have not pushed hard for an inclusive dialogue. Everybody seems to wait for their opportune moment to say, until we get to the Unity Palace. But I think you all agree with me. This question is going to not only Mimi, but to all the panelists, that without an inclusive dialogue, and a way forward to resolve this crisis with the unconditional release of the Anglophone uh, political prisoners. Biya has
Yeah.
failed woefully, and there is no scenario where we would envisage him to run again to become or succeed himself at the helm of the supreme magistracy in that country. Mimi, over.
Yes, you used the right word. It's a mockery, absolute mockery. When Honorable Aya Paul Abine was being humiliated and detained, where were these voices? We didn't hear from the opposition. We didn't hear just a few of them, of course, they came out to say, but like the opposition in general standing with one voice to say, this is wrong. We didn't really get to see that. And most of these same people are now calling him a hero. We saw them posting on Facebook, on Twitter, celebrating his legacy, celebrating him. When he needed them the most, they weren't there. So this is not just about Ayapola Avenue. We have so many dissenting voices, people that are one of the reasons why we are where we are today. Manso BBC, for instance, is currently being detained in Yaoundé. How many people? He was sold by an opposition minister who has now become a member of the government. Talking
Momo
and
Dieudonné.
Jean Momo was his lawyer and later turned against him, which is something very, very unprofessional in the legal field in Cameroon, but we never saw condemnation. He's languishing in prison right now. How
And
many of these?
I think it's
Yeah, you wanted to
cynical
say
to see
something.
some people here sometimes even try to justify Momo's political shenanigans to the point where some people would want people to emulate Momo, the way he comes out and speaks, and the pretentiousness that you can see reading even from his own demeanor. Kenneth, what do you really think is really the situation where we don't have people who could stand up and speak with conviction that what is going on is wrong and it is unacceptable that we keep pandering with the lives of people from this region while you have a 92-year octogenarian still at the helm of control. And I agree with Dr. Seme, really castigating the idea that people always say the people around him are the one giving him wrong information. This guy has been in that position for 43 years. If you add when he was the director of cabinet, it's almost 60 years in that system of governance. He's an entrenched figure who has absolute control and an understanding of what is going on. What is your take on this?
Thank you, Brado. Okay, so let's start with the charade of a dialogue that took place. Prior, in fact, Paul Biya was advised by the French to have this dialogue. And so there was no intention whatsoever on his part to have a dialogue at all. But because of one of the United Nations agencies on human rights, they were about to, I guess, do something to Cameroon. Paul Biya was advised accordingly by the French, hey, you better have this dialogue because this is what is coming your way. And that is how that whole fair semblant charade of a dialogue took place. Prior to them having that dialogue, they sent their operatives all around the world to, to solicit those who could potentially go into the dialogue. Well, as we've discovered, it was a huge charade. It's similar to what I would say was the 1996 Constitution that people like Anyangwe, Carlson left completely. In the 1996 Constitution, it was an Owona Constitution purely because they had even talked about having elections at the level, gubernatorial elections at the level of provinces. But a few years later, all Paul Biya did was change the word province to regions, and then he was still nominating these governors, So there was no intention on his part whatsoever. Again, in 1979, Amadou Ahidjo had Paul Biya chair a committee. In that committee, I think David Boemachoyi was there and Mrs. Dorothy Njoma. This committee was to look into Anglophone issues. In fact, I don't know anybody who has ever seen that report. I've not seen the report. And if he were genuine enough, why would he not go bring a report that he himself chaired a commission? Why would he not go dig it up? Unless they burnt it, they committed arson in one of their many things that they have to be, normalized, committing arson in official government buildings and going free. So maybe that report doesn't even exist anymore. Well, the case of Honorable Paul Aya Abine, may his soul rest in peace, is a typical of all what we have seen from, I would say, a lot of the opposition leaders. In fact, you alluded to what is the Jean de Dieu Momo, who is fondly referred to these days as l'opposition de l'opposition. It's really interesting. A lot of the political atmosphere in Cameroon looks like a circus, but unfortunately, lives are being affected throughout the board, completely. I mean, there's so many things that we could actually talk about here. But, Brado, when it comes to this Anglophone problem or the Southern Cameroon's crisis, what have you, I do not see how the regime in place can solve this crisis. In fact, they've run out of ideas. They are not willing to. There's a lot of folks who are embedded in the system, even young people like you have this guy at the presidency of the republic. He was here in New York, Ferdinand Gongo. You know, a lot of these guys, they do not want these problems solved. Some of them are making good money from it, so they continue to perpetuate the crisis. There is no willingness on their part to solve it. None.
So, Doc, what is the way forward? Is it for the Cameroonian population to massively register to vote in the upcoming presidential elections and vote the regime out? So I suppose in a system that has been so truncated and really tilted towards the incumbent, because history shows that there's never been, apart from 1992, a credible opposition. I don't really think that is because of the disunity among the opposition parties, but the corrupt nature of the electoral code. And you don't have an electoral body that is appointed by the incumbent, and in some strange way you expect that you're going to get people to register and you would win, because to most people the elections are won before they're even conducted. So it is obvious, it's hard to dismiss those who have studied that system for too long, to dismiss that without any substantial structural changes of the electoral code, maybe beginning with the publication of the electoral list and the electoral register, it will be hard for any opposition to mount a credible challenge to the Biya regime and the CPDM machinery. What do you think?
You see, the Chinese has this interesting proverb. If you and I are in negotiation and you fool me once, shame on to you. You fool me twice, shame on to me, because I should have known better. The Biya system regime has fooled Cameroonians not once, not twice, not thrice, not 4 times, many times over that we've lost count. There is no way we can vote him out. You can only vote someone out when the system is fundamentally fair, when the elections are going to be free and fair. That's the only way you can vote him out. If he runs, and there are all indications that he will win. Vote, register massively as you wish. I'm sorry, but he will not be voted out, because that system belongs to him. He controls the system, and you said it right. He's authoritarian, and that's what authoritarians do. They control everything. Mr. Biya is responsible for rain and sunshine in Cameroon. Everybody who is anybody in any position of power and authority in Cameroon is there because of him. There is no way we can push him out using the electoral way. I'm sorry to say this, but that's just
Doc,
the truth.
if I may,
Yes.
please just follow up with 1 or 2 things that you did mention. You talked about the voters register, where the Biya regime has basically That's where the fraud starts. We have a country, I think we're 25 million, and honestly, those who should be on the voters register should be at least 12.5 million. But we barely have up to 3 million people. And then, of the 3 million people, Paul Biya claims that, I don't know, 2 point something voted him, which we know those are. Anyway, so what are the avenues available to us? Do you think that we can, we can get people on the voters register, number one? Number two, you did talk about fitness for duty. If my memory is serving me right, I think there's a constitutional council in Cameroon that can potentially declare that the president is unfit for duty. So what avenues do you think we have to prevent Paul Biya from running with the Constitutional Council? Recently, MRC, and I think Abdurrahman Hamadu requested them to produce the voters register or so. Talk to the Constitution. No, I think it was a LECAM. But one of these bodies was attacked by MRC. I think it's the Constitutional Council. So what are your thoughts around that whole, around this?
I wish I could find a way to tell you that within our system of government, we have constitutional methods, protected methods to oversee this government. But I don't see any, to be honest with you. I really don't see any, because register, vote, win the election is still going to go through Electoral, and then it will end up in the Constitutional Council, all members of which are appointed by Mr. Biya. I can tell you there is no way that council is going to proclaim results that are not favorable to Mr. Biya. It will not happen. Let's not dream. It will not.
So does that give
The
credence
only way,
to Doc?
yes.
So does that give credence to the people who, I think the last time Kamto went out in one of his outings, he said there will be consequences, and they should not try to do what they did in 2018, because this time around there would be consequences. What are these consequences? I know you are not a member of MROC, but does that really give reason to what is building in this whole dark cloud that is hovering over the country, that if Biya runs again, which the Secretary General of the CPDM had so far maybe confirmed that is going to do it, and you could hear some of the voices in the grapevine that it's late for them to look for another candidate to prepare them to run. What do you really think that Cameroonians should do? I think last week we had somebody call for a revolt, a revolution, that people should fight, and fight. What is this fight? I think a lot of the people in Cameroon point to us in the diaspora that we live in this pristine environment in air-conditioned homes and offices, and try to have the people in Cameroon engage in political activities or actions that would end them either killed or in jail. And they point with facts that there are people sitting in jail that we have abandoned them. So how do you get to mobilize people to show them that at a certain point in time they have to fight for what is right? What is it? What is the last resort? Given that,
Thank you.
as you've rightly pointed, the system is so screwed to the point where it would be insanity for anybody to think they can somehow outmaneuver the people who control that system. What options do we have? Mimi, you can come in if...
Absolutely. So, you see, fortunately, even President Biya has a boss. Even though the people don't seem to know that. He answers to the people, and I want to be clear here. I'm not advocating for violence. I'm not advocating for the killing of anyone. What I'm saying is that when the people have had enough, when you've pushed the people and their backs are on the wall, have been on the wall for so long, there is no way to go, no other way to go than to push back. Power is in the hands of the Cameroonian people. That country belongs to all of us. It doesn't belong to the people of the center region, the eastern region, and the south region, where you have a situation where 5 of the 10 governors come from those 3 regions. 35 of the 58 SDOs come from those 3 regions. These 3 regions basically are holding Cameroon hostage. Well, there comes a time when enough is enough. I think a plausible way is for the people to say we've had enough. We're not saying go out and burn things, but you can come out in a peaceful manner and say we've had enough. And if enough people should come out, again, in a peaceful but massive manner, that kind of peaceful revolution can actually usher in the transition that we so desperately need. Cameroon has to be remade. Cameroon, we have to start again. We have to clean the slate and start all over.
I
We have to
think,
do
Doc,
that.
let me go over to Mimi. It is easier said than done that people should come out in their numbers. Uh, the history in the southern Cameroon points to the fact that that government has a total disregard of the lives of its citizens. They came out in their numbers, and the government came down with gunships against the people. You remember 2008 with what happened in Douala? At a certain point in time, you cannot underestimate the repressive nature of that government and the extent they are willing to go. Mimi, if you look at Cameroon hosts several vibrant civil society groups in different parts of the country. However, given the government's authoritarian nature, the civic space is shrinking. In 2018, the government even obstructed efforts by the Catholic Church to organize a national Anglophone conference geared towards finding a solution to the conflict. Fast forward to 2025, we are seeing an unprecedented attack on civil society with groups like Red Hack of Barrister Aliscom. Could we see this continued shrinking of civic society with the upcoming elections, and should in case Biya retains the presidential powers in that country?
It's not even a prediction, it's already happening. And it's not just the civil society organizations in Cameroon, even the press is being stifled. Remember the killings of journalists recently, the brutal killings of journalists recently is just part of the story. Wazizi, the case of Wazizi, Martinez Zogo, Ella Bebe, and other journalists that have been killed just because they were speaking truth to power. We know how it ended. You've provided some examples there, talking about how bishops were not allowed to hold the conference, and even recently the sorry, the CSOs. But let's just talk about the recent bishop conference in
Conference.
Boya. Sorry, maybe some. Can I come shortly?
Yeah, take some water. Ken, can you take where she's?
Yes, I can. In fact, Brado, this is where I think, as Dr. Wilson Efseme alluded to, almost all the avenues for recourse have been consumed. So the question, therefore, is what do we do? And as Mimi mentioned earlier, a few moments ago, Mimi talked about the fact that voices at all at different levels have actually been stifled. This now brings to bear what is the role of us in the diaspora. What I can say, therefore, here is that I've noticed for a pretty long time, Brado, that the Biya regime does not react in any way, form, or shape to the cries and outcries of the people, or the masses of the people in Cameroon. The Biya regime, I would call them knee-jerk reactions, engages in these knee-jerk reactions when the people cry out loud. Now, it did not matter, for example, when there were when there was a lot of embezzlement in Cameroon, what Cameroonians said. But the moment that the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which is the World Bank, the moment that the IMF and other partners, such as France in particular, the United States, of course, and then to a certain extent, I would say perhaps Germany and England, the moment that these guys got up and spoke, that is the only time that the Biya regime would react. Now, so where do we come in there for as our diaspora role? If those of us who are in the diaspora, the United States, if we can bring to bear these institutions to put some real pressure over there in Cameroon for this guy to step aside, because that way we will be able to evade a full-blown civil war. If our role in the diaspora from now onwards, we talk to these governments where we live, we talk to these financial institutions, let this guy step aside. It is time for him to go away gracefully and peacefully. Else, unfortunately, we will definitely have an insurrection in that place. And what happened in places like Liberia with Samuel Doe, we're going to have a repeat situation in Cameroon.
Dr. Wilson, I think we have this tendency here in the diaspora to talk in dispersed ranks. And that has been part of the weakness of, Mimi, welcome back. That has been part of the difficulties and the challenge that we have in the mobilization of people here in the diaspora to muster any kind of sustained campaign against the regime. You have even some of the journalists, few like Mimi, making their voices known, but you have reputable journalists here in the diaspora who were muzzled or stifled from speaking in Cameroon. But even here in the diaspora, they have not made their mark felt, either at the level of networking. How do we maybe force francs? I think all these conversations that we have tried to look at that contraption called Cameroon, I think we are neglecting the superseding role of francs. So Doc, I want you to look at the francs equation. Given that they somehow have been talking in the background of decentralization, which up to now still has not been done. France has ruled out even the talk about federalism, much less the independence. My question is, will change in Cameroon go through Paris? Is Paris the only route that Cameroon can have a change of governance?
Also, talked about this, and I agree with him. You see, Cameroon doesn't exist in isolation. No country does. This whole world has global power structures, and we know that that's just the truth. Paris, France has a stranglehold on much of Africa. That's a fact. What is also true is that Washington can muscle Paris. A few years ago, I was speaking with this friend, well, not a friend, it's an acquaintance that works at the State Department, the US State Department. And so I was trying to pick his mind on what the State Department can do to support the Anglophone cause. You know what he told me? He said, Wilson, do you understand that there are 26,000 Cameroonian American citizens? I said, well, I didn't know. I didn't have those numbers, those statistics. He said, yes, there are 26,000 Cameroonian Americans in the US. And then he went further. He said, if you guys can mobilize a few thousands, 3, 4, 5, 6,000, you show up at the White House, I promise you, Cameroon will be on top of the priority list of the US Secretary of State, and the president will do something about it because he has to. That's how it works. And I sat back and I said, oh, wow, 26,000. We can make things happen. But you are right. You're right. Where is the unity? Where is the unity of purpose? Since 2017, when my organization, and I'm not taking credit, but it just happened that in 2017, we organized the first all Cameroonian conference to address the Anglophone crisis in Atlanta. But since 2017, nothing like that, nothing that comprehensive has ever happened again. So yes, the diaspora has a very important role. We have a voice. But most importantly, those of us in the US, for example, we can actually make things happen, but we have to be united. If we speak with one voice, we go to the State Department, I promise you, the Secretary of State will listen to us and the President will listen to us.
I,
We can sit there
Doc,
and able to
I
solve
do
the
hope
problems,
that
maybe not comprehensively,
I do hope
but
that the State Department would listen to us, because I know I have been at that State Department multiple times. In the early days of this crisis, we had massive numbers of protests at the State Department. We led a massive delegation to New York with people across the United States that congregated at the UN building. So we have made these efforts. I do believe that the critical mass of the people, particularly the intellectuals and the academia, I am not also ruling out the fact that maybe the government has infiltrated some of these our communities and is making it very difficult for people to mobilize. Mimi, you as a journalist who had gone through some of the repression that a lot of people who have spoken out against the tragedy in Cameroon have faced. When Camto was picked up and locked after the election, it was Macron who intervened and he was released. What I don't understand is after 8 years today, it has practically not been possible for any Western government to call for the release of the leader of the Southern Cameroon and his leadership team, Siseku Julius Ayok Tabe. What is it that those of us in the diaspora are not doing right? Is it because those of you in the media who have also come over here in the diaspora, is it because the information is not there, we have not engaged with the right individuals, or the world has just decided to turn a blind eye to what the Norwegian Refugee Council termed the most neglected conflict in the whole world? What are the issues that have made it that for the past 8 years, even the Biya regime that had asked people to lay down their weapons and they will be granted, is that amnesty or clemency or whatever they call it, the people that they picked up in Nigeria who were not even holding arms are sitting in jail. And it gives the impression to the world that they have released some of these people who were engaged in the armed insurrection. What is really happening that we cannot mobilize? Now you are part of the diaspora. When you come in here and 1, 2 years, you are part and parcel of this diaspora. What is really going on from your own assessment as a journalist with an eye for the details on how do we get the forensic analysis of how to really get people begin to see the need that we need to mobilize?
Yeah, I'm speaking now like someone who is deeply embedded in the space. My own analysis of the situation is that the government is not interested in peace resolution, like resolving the status quo, like changing what is happening, like bringing peace in the Anglophone regions of Cameroon, addressing any major concerns that are affecting Cameroonians. That would be my evaluation. The government strategy has been violent from the very first day, and that has continued till today. Um, and it has not just continued, but it has worsened the situation. You asked a very important question: the role of journalists who are in the diaspora, whether the problem is at the level of mobilization and so on and so forth. And I also listened to Mr. Nde, who was saying that if these 3 to 5,000 people could appear at that could mobilize and protest in the US, there could be some changes. The question is, where do these more than 20,000 Cameroonians, where do they belong? What are their political affiliations? What are their what do they stand for? Cameroonian is segmented back home as it is segmented in the diaspora. We do not have a united and we do not have united citizens that speak with one voice. It's very, very difficult to bring Cameroonians together because of the level of division that exists among Cameroonians, whether in the UK, where I am, whether in Germany, in the United States, or in Cameroon itself. Look at the opposition. The opposition is highly fragmented, and the government is using that to its advantage. If you say today that for the benefit of Cameroonians, like what happened in Senegal, and the opposition leaders unite and select one person to stand as opposition leader ahead of the election, the answer will be no. I had interviewed most of the opposition leaders prior to the 2018 election, and I asked one of the candidates on set that can you unite under an opposition coalition, not as a presidential candidate? He was very, very angry that I asked him that question. So the division is not just in the diaspora, it's also in Cameroon. Journalists have tried their best and they continue to do so. The main problem that I've seen is that if Cameroonians have decided to report or talk more on social media about the things that do not really matter, such that the few that are saying the things that matter about the change that Cameroon needs, they don't really have a bigger voice because they are a minority. Cameroonians are fighting each other on social media instead of fighting for change. Cameroonians are more interesting about things that are not related to politics, are not related to leadership, change in power in Cameroon. They are interested in trivia things. For instance, if this debate is going on Facebook now, we are talking about the future of the country, and there's an ongoing debate about a boy, a man who cheated on the wife. The man who cheated on the wife's live stream will be more viewed than this one. You can attest to that. The Cameroonians have their focus elsewhere. They are not interested in things that have to do with change, changing Cameroon, changing the future for them. They are not interested. And when I'm talking about the level of division, this is something that is very important. Dr. Etseme is here. Probably you're watching the social media space. You are a very learned host. You are also here. You must have been studying what is happening on social media space. As a journalist in person, I have faced and continue to face much, not just from the Cameroonian government, but members of the opposition, separatists have attacked me attacking me and accusing me of being pro-Biya. Pro-Biya are calling me terrorist. That is the divide and rule strategy that the government has put in place to discredit, because the first thing that they will do is to discredit you such that nobody will believe or trust in what you say and do. And that is the knowledge that they inculcate into Cameroonians. That is the problem that we have in Cameroon. And we need what we need as a solution. We need change of mentality. We need the voices that matter should start talking. We have a lot of learned Cameroonians in the diaspora, and they've just gone quiet because the social media space has been invaded by charlatans. That's the right word. Who go about saying the things that shouldn't be said. Learned Cameroonians have to start coming on board to talk about the things that matter for the country, to talk about change, to denounce, to talk some sense into all of us, so that we know that this should be the priority and not the other.
I
Not
think
people who go
maybe
and be attacking
maybe
fellow Cameroonians. That
to
is
hold
my
you
own
to
point
that
of view.
maybe to hold you to that point. I think you are right on the money on that. Because even when some of these religious institutions came over here in the diaspora to engage with the supposed activists, you will be
Mhm.
surprised that the people that they seem to think represent the Cameroonian diaspora are the loud sounding nothings on social media. I was
Yeah.
amazed for somebody to point to me, a canon lawyer for that matter, to say, oh, these are the people who we are talking to. Somebody that you cannot hold a substantive conversation with them for 2, 3 minutes. These are the people that you point that they are representing Cameroonians or Southern Cameroonians in this generic manner. I look at the academia. Those of them that are in universities, most of them go into these campuses and they are mute. And educational institution is rife for this kind of debate. None of our own people, I think, except somebody in Kimen in Boston, who had tried to organize some of these conversation on campus, but majority of the Cameroonian diaspora in academia, they have done virtually nothing. Is it just because they feel comfortable with their lifestyle here, or is it because they are either having some connection or interest with the regime that they are protecting? It is just inconceivable why people would have the freedom to speak up in an environment like this. If you were complaining that you cannot speak up in Cameroon, why would you not even speak up here in the diaspora? You have some people who have come here, they have used the struggle for their asylum
Yeah.
and to regularize their stay here in the West that are actually even against any change in Cameroon. So Cameroon seems to be a very unique case. I don't know what we are, for those of us who are active within trying to look for credible ways to change the situation, what is it that we have not done right? What is it that needs to be done to see that we address these core issues?
Dr. Eseme talked earlier about mobilization, but I want to stress on that fact from a different perspective. Mr. Ande earlier talked about just 3 or less than 3 million people voting for President Phobia. What about the more than 10 million eligible voters in Cameroon? What happens to them? Why are they not registering to vote? Such that when your vote, the outcome of the election is not reflected in the election result, you can now legitimately go out and say, look, I voted for this person, but we majority of us voted for this person, but we are now discovering that the elections were rigged, and we want the truth to prevail. Cameroonians, if going out now will be tantamount to just killing, like we've seen that. We've seen so many CRM members are currently behind bars. Kawala supporters are currently behind bars just because they were speaking truth to power and decided to protest, to call for change. That's just something that happened a couple of months ago. What if they do that this year? What are the guarantees that they will be safe? But if you have legitimate claims that you voted, this number of Cameroonians voted, and the outcome of the elections did not reflect the number of people who actually voted for a particular candidate, then you have a point. Cameroonians are not even reaching to vote. That is one of the problems. Then there's also this general statement of the elections must be rigged, they will be rigged after all. Electoral officials are appointed by President Pobi, and what the work would they do will reflect their ideals and so on. The real answer is actually no. If more Cameroonians register to vote, that's already a trend. In fact, the government is doing everything possible to get fewer Cameroonians to register. Because if we have more Cameroonians to register on the electoral register, it's going to be a huge problem for President Paul Biya to contain and his cabal. It will be difficult for them to actually rig the election results if more people, the additional voters, vote for another candidate. That's something that we have to start doing.
Mimi, to press you on that point, more Cameroonians registered in 1992, and the results proclaimed did not show the candidate who won. So, if you look at over here in Venezuela, for example, Maduro is still there. The record show that the opposition won. Once you have an entrenched regime, and the lip service that the West pays to some of these issues. Look at that still in Venezuela. Washington, the Europeans made a little bit of noise. This is the second time in a row. And after a week, once the cameras or the lights are off, everything looks normal. And it's the same situation in Cameroon. Remember in 2018, there was a little bit of noise. It was still there. And immediately the lights were off. Some people were thrown in jail. Nothing was done. So at the end of the day, we cannot continue to blame the people because, like Dr. Eseme said, fool me once, I would get angry with you, but if you fool me twice, I should be a fool myself. We have been fooled from 1992 even to the present day. So you need some mental uplifting of people to really believe that this time is going to be different. Now, that is not to say that they should not register to vote. They should go in there and register in their numbers. What is difficult is to get them to revolt, peaceful revolt against the system if their votes are not properly counted or are located to the candidate that they voted for. How do we really get that connection that we can have people to say we're going to vote, and once the results come out, if there is evidence that our votes were not properly counted, there should be a huge national outrage. How do you really get to that point?
Okay, Brado and Mimi, let me just attempt to respond to what Brado has just said here. For some strange reasons, even when you join, even before the social media of WhatsApp came up, right? When you join this email list, especially when we used to have Camnet back in the day in the 90s, and then later on Cam Network with Yahoo groups and whatnot, there is a very strange way in which Cameroonians react to things. Cameroonians react to things as if it's a them issue and not our issue. When you go to the list of other countries, such as Nigeria in particular, or Senegal, or Burkina Faso, they know that this is our collective problem. How do we resolve it? That has given rise to a general malaise with Cameroonians in Cameroon, and then our general approach to politics it's just lethargic. It's as if Cameroonians have been hypnotized into inaction, whereas the exact opposite is supposed to be true. See, we can say all we want, analyze Cameroonians, whatever the case may be, but at the end of the day, Paul Biya has outlived his usefulness. I mean, this guy has been in power since 1975. And this really strange thing, what we are gradually discovering, Brado, is that Paul Biya basically was a Putin. Oh, yes, Paul Biya was a Putin. Paul Biya left France in 1962. No, not 62, I think 61 or so. He was sent to Cameroon by the French government, by France. I don't even know whether he was on Cameroon's payroll when he started working under William Etekimbouma at Education. He was sent to Cameroon by France. So we had a Putin in Paul Biya because throughout, and even before he became Secretary General at the presidency in 64 or so, where there was a scandal over there, the dear doc, the intelligence services of France, colonial France, was at the presidency. And there was a lady who was in charge there. So President Biya took over that position in 62 and basically presided over the intelligence services of Cameroon, reporting to France, of course. And then later on, I don't know how he eventually found his way in 1975 to the Prime Minister's office, but there wasn't even supposed to be any Prime Minister of Cameroon after the so-called referendum of 72. That position had been abolished. So again, we see the intelligence services, of course, and through Elf Serepka, meandering its way into the Cameroon body politic until he became president in 1982, where he later boasted of being the mayor elect of François Mitterrand. This guy officially is 92. Maybe his real age is even 97, who knows. But honestly, look at how he's walking. He forgets where he is. He's amnesic. He has dementia, all of the above, you know. He please needs to step aside. And I would encourage every Cameroonian, wherever they are, whatever they can do, to stand on one side of this huge log that is bothering us and let us push it down. Let us push it down. Mimi, please, I think you had something to say. You were to come over.
Doc.
Mr.
Okay, go ahead, Mimi.
Yeah, sorry about that. So Mr. Kevin was talking earlier about it happened in the 90s, and yeah, that has been used a lot over the years, that the elections were rigged, is official. And at least when we are talking about election rigging in Cameroon, that is an example. So we all are talking about it today because we know that in history books, John Frinty actually won the elections in the 90s. But in the 90s, the situation that time and now are day and night. Uh, John Frinty didn't have the luxury of social media and this kind of, platforms to talk about, announce, call for change, push for change in leadership that we have today. The situation today is completely different. And it's left for the opposition leaders and the stakeholders, those who matter, to make good use of these facilities that we have today to push for that change. It's possible, it's doable, but more and more Cameroonians need to register and vote for the candidate that they want, so that even if they are going to the streets, there is a valid reason, it's constitutional, is correct, rather than to just go to the street and get killed or arrested. That would be my opinion.
So, to go back to the question about the special status before we run up, one of the most recent U.S. response prompted by the conflict was the designation of Cameroon for temporary protected status, the TPS, effective for 18 months, beginning in June 2022. TPS allows Cameroonian citizens who have resided in the United States since April 2022 to retain or to remain and work in the country until the situation in Cameroon stabilizes. Doesn't this contradict the Biya regime's claim and even the Catholic Church's claim that the things are getting back to normalcy?
The question is to me.
Yes.
Of course, it's a pure contradiction, but it should be very, very clear that the bishops didn't say that things are going back to normal in the uniform regions of Cameroon. They were very categorical that there were woes plaguing the country, economic wise, socially, politically, things that needed to change. They denounced corruption. They denounced unemployment. They denounced the conflicts in Cameroon. They denounced tribalism. They talked about a lot of things that we are talking about. It boils down to bad governance and the need for change in Cameroon. Some of the bishops were already talking clearly that Biya shouldn't even stand again before the conference that took place in Boya recently. So the bishops didn't say that all is well. But because of the political situation, the political climate in the country that we all know, I'm not trying to be the devil's advocate. You cannot expect the bishops to go and say, oh, we don't want beer, we want this, we want that, we want that. But after 45 years, a 91-year-old leader, there's nothing he can do now that he was not able to do in the past 42 years. And I want to agree with Mr. Nde to say that change is what Cameroon needs now. Biya is already old to run the country. It doesn't matter what members of the CPDM say. It doesn't matter what his supporters say. Government ministers, because they are profiting from their ministerial positions, positioning their family members. But we are now talking for the general interest of Cameroonians as a whole, that Biya is unfit to run the country. About his health, I am not sure, but his age doesn't permit him, because even my father, who is way younger than Paul Biya, cannot run the country. I won't, as a daughter, won't allow him to run the country. For Cameroon to move forward, because you've talked about the government has said that things are going on normal. It's not also the first time that the government has said things are going on well in the Anglophone regions. At the end of the day, who are those being killed? Separatists who are being killed in the Anglophone regions of Cameroon are Cameroonians. The soldiers who are being killed are Cameroonians. The politicians, young girls and boys who are going through all the challenges they are going through in the Anglophone regions are Cameroonians. They are not Bobby. They are not his ministers. So the problem is actually, we are actually the ones bearing the brunt of Biya's bad governance. And for it to end, there's need for change. Because Biya has failed, and there is no way anyone can convince me that there's anything meaningful that the current regime can offer anymore. And for things to move forward in Cameroon now, the Anglophone crisis must be addressed. There's
And
need for genuine, we've always talked about genuine, meaningful dialogue. The meaningful dialogue is not about the dialogue that held Yaoundé, and it was not inclusive. Everyone has to come on board. All Cameroonians have to come on board to decide their future, whether Biya is present or not. That would
uh,
be my opinion.
I think, Dr. Eseme, that could conclude that a vote for Biya will be a vote for continuation of the pain and suffering, the misery in that country. Wouldn't you think so? Do you really think that if something is not done otherwise, would you look the people of Southern Cameroon and the people of Cameroon whom you love so much and tell them with a clear conscience that the continuation of Biya at the helm of that country is a continuation of the misery, the corruption, the lies, the killing of innocent people in the southern Cameroons, the reluctance or the intransigence to engage in credible and inclusive dialogue. Would you, in all fairness, call it out that with Biya in that country, the Anglophone problem would never be resolved?
You see, I don't want to leave the impression here that Dr. Eseme is against elections. I love elections. I want elections. But elections should be conducted in a free and fair manner. Of course. But democracy is more than elections. Democracy is accountability, it's responsibility, it's justice. Democracy is fairness. We all agree, we may disagree on certain things, but I think we should agree on this. President Biya is a dictator. And unless we don't agree on that, but if we agree that he is a dictator, dictators don't leave power voluntarily. They don't. That's just the nature of dictatorship. So, the president is, for whatever reason, unwilling not only to leave power, but to solve the problem. You see, again, I'm sorry, I have to go back to because a lot of what I see in the president, I see him as a public servant, which he is a public service worker, because he works for the people. When you have a worker who goes to work, you see him physically at work, but that employee is not productive. There is a term for that. It's called presenteeism. You see the body, you see the person at his desk or her desk, but no work is being done. We have a man who has not held a cabinet meeting in 6, 7 years. I think the last one was 2019. He is head of the Judiciary Council. He hasn't held a meeting of that council in at least 4 years. He doesn't show up. In 42 years of power, he's been into the two Anglophone regions in six or seven times in 42 years. So that once every 6 or 7 years. Come on now. We have to reach the conclusion that he is unwilling to serve the purpose for which he was elected. Now, if we cannot push him out, we cannot shove him out, and I will not encourage it because push indicates violence, shoving indicates violence. We have to find a way of encouraging him to step aside for the good of the nation. Because I believe in my bone that if he's a candidate, if he runs, everything will be done to ensure that he wins. And it will be another circle for another 7 years. That's what I believe. The president has missed a step. There is no way you can run a country for 42 years without losing control. I have practiced medicine for 24, 25 years, and I'm tired. I find myself missing a step or two every now and then. The only way you can be in charge of a country as complex as Cameroon for 42 years and you're still willing to be there, it's because you're doing absolutely nothing. Because if you were doing your own job, if you were committed, you would be exhausted. Someone, whoever that person is, has to get that message across to the person. Because at this point, he is not willing. He doesn't see the need to leave. It has to be explained to him that it's time for some honorable exit.
Is he even hearing these calls, these loud voices, or is just the sycophants that are around him that manage the amount of information that he consumes? Is he really, because I know we're trying to avoid saying mentally is really the capacity has deteriorated because nobody has made a medical diagnosis on him, but it is visible. Is he really in a state of mind where these calls, all of these appeals that he should not run, even before the December 30th or 31st end of year address to the nation, that he indicated that he still wants to do the job that he was called upon to do by the good Lord. Maybe the good Lord is only in his own house, or there's no other Cameroonian who can do the job better than him. And you see that mindset that has speculated in that particular region. You were pointing to the number of governors and the number of SDOs. Even in the foreign service, the ambassadors, as the most important embassies across the globe, are people either from the center, the south, or the east. Here in Washington, I've been here for some time now. Uh, the last three of them, Menduga, Atangana, and now Esumba. All of them are from center region or the south region. Atangana was even not even speaking English fluently, even though he was in Nigeria before coming over here.
Yeah.
So it is quite true that there is some state capture that it might not be only Biya alone, but you have these gangsters that have really found home because of the Ali Baba himself has provided them shelter. What do we do? Um, Kenneth?
Okay, Brado, I have heard for a pretty long time, going back even more than 30 years, when I was in Cameroon, lived there as a teenager, what have you, that, oh, President Biya does not know what is going on. Oh, the people around him, and I mean, you name it, what have we not heard, right? The people around him, and all these convenient excuses. Look, like I mentioned a few moments ago, since 1960 something, Paul Biya used to play golf with Mr. John Nbangu over in CDC in the 60s. So let us not sit here, or anybody else for that matter, to pretend that, oh, Paul Biya doesn't know what is going on. How come there has been a constant since even before 82, we've seen so many people, whether it's Etienne Sama, Joseph Owona, I mean, you name all these guys who were part of this, I guess, mafia, they've come and gone. But the kingpin of the mafia, the head of the mafia, is still there, waxing strong. So how come, as a matter of fact, so let me say this. See, if we say Frank Biya is officially Paul Biya's first son, today in 2025, Frank Biya would be, I think, 53 years old. If Frank Biya got married at, let's say, 30, 33, his own child will be 20 years old. Right? Okay. So, how are you going to tell me that a father, a grandfather, and in some cases a great-grandfather, his little children will not be running around him and telling him both formally and informally what people are saying? I can assure you 100% that Paul Biya knows everything that is going on. He doesn't, both through diplomatic dispatches, through intelligence reports from the governors, and you name it, that guy, he knows what the hell is going on everywhere. So let him do the honorable thing and just step aside.
Thank you. And in closing, I think I want to tie it back to the topic that we had closely looked at, which is a special status. The people who are actually benefiting from the fallout of this war are quick to deflect attention to those in the diaspora as beneficiaries. But in actuality, everybody who is occupying any position or sitting in any institution created as a result of the war and the spilling of the blood of these innocent victims from these communities in the English-speaking regions has blood in their hands. So you can't feed from the fallout and claim otherwise. Could this be the people the Catholic Church was referencing as the people who do not want the war to end? It might not just be beer. The people who are actually benefiting from the regional House of Chiefs, the regional councils, even though they are not functional, but you have individuals there who are being paid and they are earning a living. You have people who have earned appointments, even to some high level positions in Cameroon. So I think that they are benefiting from what has happened and what is happening. Uh, is it really possible to get these people to look deep into themselves and understand that the only way we're going to resolve the crisis is for Biya to step aside, for somebody to come in with a fresh vision to cut and engage the disenfranchised and the neglected people of the southern Cameroons, because we can keep living in denial. In as much as you have Seseku Julius Ayoktabe and the other leaders of the people of southern Cameroon sitting in the dungeons in Yaoundé. In the past couple of months, you have Dr. Cho Ayaba arrested in Norway. In as much as we believe in the rule of law, but there is no way we can also extricate ourselves that these things have political undertones. So it is imperative that at the end of the day, the Cameroon people have to take their own future into their hands. It's either they overwhelm the system before we even get to the elections. The system needs to be overwhelmed to make sure that the world see exactly what is happening within the system. We cannot sit and wait until after the elections, and then you have a few voices. You have fake electoral observers from Amnesty International sit in Cameroon and tell you that the elections were free and fair, and then you keep the international community in a bind. Who are we to believe? These guys have played these games before. We cannot continuously remain uh, the balls in this ping pong game that they are playing. We have to find a way to mobilize the people to stand up for their own rights. And I think conversations like this begin to really, in as much as you might not get the attention of the people from the beginning, it is very important that we begin to engage, look at other channels. We engage with the people in academia, the professionals, the business people who are sending things in that ridiculous thing they call port in Douala, where before you take something out, it looks like you're getting a needle out of a haystack. How do we get people to see that it is not only the people on the ground who are impacted by the bad policies that have been brought upon that country by the ineptitude of Biya and his sycophants? How do we mobilize here in the diaspora? So I'm going to go to you, Mimi, for your final thoughts, then Dr. Semer, and then we would get a final thoughts from Kenneth.
Thank you so much, Mr. Taben. And I also just want to appreciate the platform that you've created, the spotlight. I'm being part of the conversation for the first time, and such platforms are very, very important to enlighten Cameroonians about what is happening and what needs to happen for things to get better. One thing that I wanted to mention, because as you were talking, I was summarizing some of the points. First of all, Mr. Ande was saying that the system needs to, no, the Bia has to go. He has to look for ways to step down. It's not just Bia alone. I would add to that to say that the entire system, that has failed the country, failed to address the Anglophone crisis, failed to address the problem of unemployment. It had to go completely. It includes Biya, his entire government, his ministers, because they have failed Cameroonians woefully for decades. That's the first point I wanted to make. Secondly, Cameroonians have to know that the challenges ahead abound. There are attacks on civil society actors that have been like some sort of the voice for Cameroonians. You won't know the number, you cannot imagine the number of reports that civil society actors like the REDAC, organizations like REDAC, that of Agbobala, many other civil society organizations have been reporting. They have been doing a lot of reports about this situation in Cameroon. And thanks to these reports, the world actually knows what is happening in Cameroon, but the government is hell bent, is determined to erase the civil society before the election. We, having seen what has been happening with the media landscape, the government is very, very determined to do what it can to silence independent reporting and independent media and and make them incredible, to make them and to discredit them. Sorry, to discredit them. That is what the government has been trying to do, and the government is almost succeeding. The government has done all it can to arrest even innocent people. A couple of weeks back, there is a Cameroonian who is currently detained at the New Bed prison. He's been writing to me. He came from the US. Mr. Taben, where you are, and he was arrested in Cameroon for no reason. He said on his phone, nothing about the conflict, nothing about politics, nothing about corruption was found on his phone, but he is currently being detained. So there are many of such cases. There are so many Cameroonians who are unjustly detained in across Cameroon, not just in Douala, Yaoundé, all the major cities of Cameroon for doing nothing, for no reason. Those are some of the problems. I'm citing and highlighting them. There are Cameroonians who leave universities, English speaking Cameroonians, they graduate from universities, they don't have access, they don't have jobs. Let me take you to the far north. Women give birth to children, and children grow up to like they get to 20 years without birth certificates. We have the figures and we report those things on daily basis. Access to roads is problematic. People don't have access to water. Areas that are hardest hit by Boko Haram, there's no education. In the two Anglophone regions of Cameroon, they are deserted villages. There are there are no roads. There are no schools. Even if you say let children go back to school, which school? There is high rate of insecurity in the two Anglophone regions. That is the situation in Cameroon as you are speaking. We probably are speaking from the comfort of our homes, probably in the diaspora. Here I'm in the UK. Some of our brothers in the US, others in Europe, and so on. But those who are back home can tell you how difficult is it to even say something negative about the current system. We saw the deal on Fundi. There are many English speaking Cameroonians in Fundi. But he said that anyone who says anything negative about Bia will be ostracized. If a Jew in the heart of Yaoundé can say that, imagine what a Jew in a remote locality would do. And no one said that it was wrong. We saw the minister himself saying that no one should question or talk about the health of President Paul Biya. So that is how suppressed we have been. You wouldn't blame journalists for not talking. You wouldn't blame civil society actors for not doing reports. Because people are scared. You don't know what can even happen to your family member. If you talk about it, maybe even from the diaspora, you don't know. So what is the way forward, like you asked? We have to change our conversation. We have to re-strategize. There's been a lot of talks. Bia is not on the media. Bia doesn't know. Mr. Ndes said it. He knows what is happening. That's why he started his speech on the 31st saying that I appreciate that you're supporting me. So he is saying that he is listening to the cause for him to stand again. Those were his words. And he appreciates Cameroonians who have been supporting him, and that you continue to rule, you continue to serve. So he listens to the calls for him to stand. He knows. Since the Anglophone crisis started in 2006, every year when he addresses the nation, Even on 11 February, he talks about the Anglophone crisis. He knows that there is a conflict in the Anglophone region and that soldiers, civilians, people are dying every day. He understands, he knows that these debates are ongoing. He knows these problems. He knows that there's high rate of unemployment. He knows that people don't even want him to be president anymore, but he is still there. So we need to change the conversations, change the strategy, work together, because if there's division, we cannot achieve anything if we are divided. If Cameroonians work together, change the conversation, let the learned voices start talking, let the Cameroonian intellectual start talking. I'm so happy that I met Dr. Eseme and Ms. Ande today. But Cameroonians I've never talked to before, I've never met you before, but I'm so happy to see that there is a segment, or like there is a group of Cameroonians that think like you think. You're thinking about the future of the country, the need for change. You are not being individualistic. You're not being selfish. You're thinking about the future of the country. We need more Cameroonians like you to come out to the media. When you get invited, come and talk to Cameroonians. We need objective Cameroonians. We have universities across the country. Lecturers will come to me inbox and say, please hide my identity. So who should talk on behalf of the
On behalf,
intellectuals? Journalists
absolutely.
and get arrested? That's the question.
Yep. That's just the sad part of Mimi. Dr. Eseme,
Listen, I really appreciate this honor and privilege. Thank you so much to share this platform with Mimi and Kenneth. Mimi, thank you. Your perspectives have been really refreshing and unique, and you really know what you're saying. So thank you. It's an honor. Kenneth, you are an authority in what you do. So thank you. Continue to do your good work. You see, I agree with Mimi and Kenneth. There is no indication that President Biya is not alert and oriented, as we say in medicine. He knows what is going on. As we say in the streets of Kumba, where I grew up, I think he is just a corny man. Na corny man. The man know what he do. He no one leave. He doesn't want to leave power. 42 years, and he still wants to be there. I don't know. Power does this to you. I remember the late Tony Blair, not sorry, he's still alive, actually. A former Prime Minister of Britain, Tony Blair, when interviewed after he left power, he said something that stuck to my mind. He said when he was first elected Prime Minister, he was young, he lacked experience, and he, could not find his way easily. And then after some time, he really became good at what he was doing. And at a certain point, he was so experienced, that's when the people decided to fire him. So when people leave power, and that's why there are term limits. It's not because you are bad necessarily. It's not because you are incompetent, just that because change is necessary to bring in fresh perspectives, new opinions. So, President Biya is a victim of his own power and duration. He's a captive of the monster he himself has created. He is front and center of the problem we call Cameroonian problem. I don't see any other way we can solve this. And the Anglophone problem, by the way, is a subset of that problem. Personally, and this is just me, I don't see any way we can solve that problem with President Biya still in power. He has to leave the scene. He has to step aside. All the honors that we have to give him as someone who has actually served his nation for, good or for bad, however we want to analyze it, but he has been there. We give him the honors. We have to really appreciate that. But we also have to say that he is not the man of the hour. He's not the right person at this time to drive the ship of state. It's not the captain we are looking for. He needs to go away. Because if he is in power, many things cannot happen because people will be afraid to get on his wrong side. He has to completely leave political power for the necessary transition. Cameroon will have to go through a transition. There's no way a new president will be elected in October and everything will be kumbaya. No, we're going to go through some tough years of a transitional period where we'll have to rebuild and change our mindset. And coming again to what Mimi said, we need to come together as a people, whether as Anglophones or the Cameroonian community as a whole. We have to find clarity of vision and unity of purpose. The country is beautiful. It belongs to all of us. We have to claim ownership. You know, I disagree with the president on so many things, but on one thing, I agree with him. In 2013, his end of year speech, and that speech keeps ringing in my ear, in my head. He talked about Cameroonians being very individualistic, that we are a people more focused on individual success than community well-being. Bingo. That's our problem. We need to have a paradigm shift from that mentality to a community-focused approach. When we do that, if we do that, I think Cameroon will be a better place for all of us. So thank you again for this opportunity.
Kenneth.
Okay, well, without delving too much into what the others have said, they've made some very great salient points. Biya wants to effect a monarchical presidency. And it is our job, it is the job of the youth to stop him in that process. This man is not thinking about his family after he leaves or after he's dead and gone. And we've seen this all over Africa and in other Asian countries where, whereby very long-term leaders, their palaces have been abandoned, their families are into hiding, even in Europe. So I will not even go to that. He knows what to do. He knows he knows the right thing to do. If he doesn't do it, the same thing will happen. History would repeat itself. Look, I was in Egypt sometime last year, and I visited the pyramids. When you visit that whole Saqqara region and all these multiple pyramids with the Sphinx, you get into a pyramid. Imagine a mountain built to bury one person or their families and members of their entourage. You see places 3,300 and what BC, 2,000 and how many BC, and so on and so forth. I mean, Biya, really? Come on, man. This is a guy who never ran for any election whatsoever. He just came out of nowhere. And you want to impose yourself on Cameroonians forever? I mean, let's be serious. Let's be serious. Anyway, finally, Brado, we here at Media to Africa, we had one of our, let's just say our heroes die. He passed away here in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. His name is more famously known as Governor George Achu Mofo in Cameroon. For those who remember the heydays of SDF, Governor George Achu Mofo resigned as governor of the Eastern Province in 1992. And because of this whole presidential election things that were rigged, and then he had to flee from Cameroon. So when he fled Cameroon around 92, he came to the United States. Governor George Achu Mofo died this past January 2025 at the age of 86. He went to primary school in Santa, and then secondary school he went to CPC Bali. He was a Boban. Also continued to Sase. He was a Soban, and then attended the University of Yaoundé. In fact, from when he finished from Yaoundé, he went to Enam, And in 1969, just listen to some of who his classmates were in Enam in 1969, Governor George Achumufo. His classmates were Laurent Esso, currently Minister of Injustice. Another classmate of his was Samson Ename, Pierre Engo, Hamadu Mustafa, David Aboem Achoyi, Gaga Aman Aji, Mr. Njamsi Abel, and then Mr. Hans Ngalame. So, well, he had 8 children and several grandchildren that he leaves to mourn him. I also want to mention, Brado, this Governor George Achumufo's death, it reminds us of all the other, some of our Anglophone heroes like Aya Paul Abine, who also died a little bit recently, and quite a few others, including somebody like Mr. Alfred Kwende. In the case of Mr. Alfred Kwende in particular, I remember that, when multi-party politics were introduced in 1990, even though Mr. Alfred Kwende was the director of École Normale de Police, he actually went to demonstrate. And in his pure Anglophone style, he just saw it as, being democratic, right? So when the gendarmes or the police officers came there to push out the crowd, they were embarrassed to see their boss, and they had to pull back. So these were some of the governing principles that us, as a people of the Southern Cameroons, had and were practicing democracy at our House of Assembly. But now it's just a totally different thing. I really hope that this year, 2025, Cameroon is really going to be ushered into the 21st century. Because quite frankly, for the past 25 years, honestly, Cameroon has been operating as if we are in the dark age. And for those who don't know what the definition of a dark or iron age is, that dark age is between 5,000 to 750 BC. That's how Cameroon has been operating.
Thank you, Kenneth. I know most of the time we become very passionate and emotional when it comes to looking for solutions to address the situation in that country. I want to thank Dr. Eseme. Also want to thank Mimi Mefo. If you want to follow Mimi, you can check her online on her platforms, Mimi Mefo Info. I think she does live streaming. Again, congratulations for your graduations with a master's degree in international journalism. I think we all have platforms. Dr. Eseme, you have a very strong platform. You have a strong voice. Mimi, you have a platform. You have a huge following. I think the responsibility is on all of us in finding areas that we agree. I strongly believe that in as much as we are disagreeing in certain areas, most of the time we try to hide the areas that we disagree instead of trying to capitalize on areas that we see openings for us to create some degree of synergy in our activities. So the challenge is going to be on you, Dr. Eseme, on you, Mimi. Kenneth is here with me. How do we create the platforms to mobilize and engage the people here in the diaspora? I know here at Media to Africa we have Dr. Jean-Marie Watonsi. We had Eric Chingi here last week. These are patriotic individuals from that country. Unfortunately, for those of us who had seen for a long time that the people of the southern Cameroons do not have a place in that country, we need to come to an understanding that we have to find a way to push Biya out, to engage in dialogue to resolve the problem in that country. Superfluous and half-baked measures like the special status have proven to be worthless than the piece of paper that it was written on. Our people cannot continuously be misled and be fooled that there is reconstruction in the Anglophone areas. Peace is returning to some of these areas, and like Mimi said, a lot of these areas have been deserted. Some of these villages would never recover. The life of a lot of people in these regions would never be the same. I think on Monday there was a situation in Bafusam where you had people who do human trafficking, had so many young girls from the northwest and southwest region in a huge mansion. I think saying they were learning computer education or something like that, but all what they were doing is trafficking these innocent young girls that come from this region. So I think we have a duty for those of us who have these platforms and have the freedom to speak with conviction and with clarity to the regime. We cannot deny that it is risky, but you have to have people who can sacrifice for the better good of the society. So I'm calling on the better angels among us that that mobilization should start right now. In situations like this, it is always very important that we can exchange information. It is now easy with social media, even though I also think there is a double-edged sword because of the confusion that it has caused, but it has also facilitated easy communication across different time zones and different regions. So thank you, and I really want to thank our viewers. This program is a weekly program every Saturday at 1 p.m. at our studios here in the DMV. Mimi, I hope to see you again, Dr. Esame. I would hope to continue this conversation, so please keep your phone lines open. We'll be very
Yes,
glad, and please do not hesitate to reach out to us if there's anything that we can do, whether would that be in collaboration to make sure that we can push these whole
conversation.
ideas and push the
Yes,
regime, bring a lot of pressure to bear. We have a lot of contacts in here that we have not really made good use of. So we need to exploit those contacts and bring pressure to bear on the regime. So on that, thank you and have a good night.
thank you. Thank you.